Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning, all panel members. Happy to see you. The November 17th, 2020 meeting of the Charter Authorizing Panel is called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone. The Charter Panel oversees the authorization, renewal, revision, and revocation of charters, and today we have a very unique agenda and a very short agenda. So we will get right to that agenda. So the first item is the consent agenda for the minutes from October 13th. I'll give you a moment to review those and then accept any revisions or a motion.
I move to accept the minutes as presented.
I second.
So I have a motion by Dr. Williams, a second by Mr. Baldwin to accept the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Our agenda item number 1 is a review of open enrollment charters. Ms. Webb, if you'll introduce that and tell us what we have as an attachment.
Good morning, Tracy Webb, Charter Unit. So the first item on the agenda was the review of the open enrollment charters, and so on the attachment you have a list of each charter, their authorizing date and expiration date of the charter, and current enrollment cap, and then you have enrollment data from 2016-17 all the way through 2021, and the 2021 number is the October 1 enrollment. All the others are 3/4 ADM. You have each campus listed for each charter, the grades served, and letter grades for the previous 3 years that they were provided. So 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19 were the most current that we have. You also have a column that students in need of support in reading. That was from 2019, 18-19. And then graduation rate 2019. We just got finished with graduation corrections. And so the new rates won't be out until a couple more weeks.
Oh, yeah, at least.
And so we won't really have updated information beyond this until probably January or February.
And then in addition to that, the data for accountability won't be calculated until October of 21. And then ESSA steering committee meets tomorrow to decide that. So panel members, in looking over this list, our intent today is to decide if there are any open enrollment charter schools that need to come before the panel for review, and then any questions that you might have for Ms. Webb or anything that you would like the charter office to investigate or research or get to you. So I'll give you a moment to look over those.
I don't know if you need to know that last year you chose to review Pine Bluff Lighthouse Charter as well as Southeast Arkansas Prep Academy. The second one is now closed.
Looking for right hand.
Ms. Clemmer?
When I was looking this over, I'm sorry, I'm going to produce my screen, so clicked the wrong one. I'm looking at Kipp Delta and the students in need, see they had a couple of C's and the rest D's, and the students in need of reading support. I'm wondering how that compares with the public schools in that area. How these numbers compare to the non-charter in that area. Could somebody look at that or find that out? Or you may know it, but.
Yes, we can. I'll give Ms. Webb a minute. She may be able to pull it up pretty quickly in My School Info. How do scores compare to traditional schools in the
Right, I mean, kind of, are they doing a better job with what they've, in the area they're serving?
Okay, great question.
Let me ask a question. This, in looking at the school letter grades, is there precedence or guidance as to what would trigger a review, or is it a subjective decision on our part?
Miss Mary Claire?
Good morning, Mary Claire Hyatt with the department. Mr. Baldwin, in the past, we've been doing this, I think this is the third year we've done this review in November. It's kind of just been subjective. The panel members have looked at the letter grades, the literacy scores, the SS School Index scores, and then any feedback from the department if we were having issues with particular schools in terms of timeliness and turning in reports or finance issues. I don't think the division has any school that's necessarily been having issues that we know of in terms of finance or turning in reports late. And I think last year, Southeast Arkansas Prep, they reviewed because there were all kinds of issues with reporting finances and the letter grade. Pine Bluff Lighthouse was reviewed because they had for several years had an F and a low SS School Index score as well as low literacy scores. So it just kind of is all of those things combined at the board's pleasure.
And Mr. Baldwin, one of the things about the timeline, as in November, is normally at this time of the year we would have new ESSA index scores, new letter grades, but because of COVID-19, the state did not assess in the spring, and therefore we have a waiver of federal accountability, and with no accountability index, there's certainly no way to identify letter grades for 2020. So this year we're looking back at last year's, the 2019 data instead of the most recent.
Thank you.
Ms. Wright McMurray,
So schools like Capital City Lighthouse.
is your microphone on?
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I know.
Like Capital City Lighthouse Lower Academy that has a D and 2 Fs. That's just an example. So are any of these schools that have scores or grades that are that low, is anything that we need to be aware of that would explain that maybe there's something that's out of the ordinary? Because just looking at it, my thought would be the ones that have Ds and Fs would be the ones that I would want to say, okay, I'd want to talk to those, unless there's something that we're not aware of or why that would be the case. Am I making sense, or that you guys could share, or is it just that they have a D and 2 Fs?
One of the things that goes along with both those questions is my concern about whether or not, say for instance with Kipp and the decline in scores and performance there, is there a process where you can track that? Well, I know you can track it, but there's some intervention. When you see a decrease, to be a result of change in students or leadership or multiple other factors. But to back in the day when I was on the state board, I know that was one of the schools that we lifted up, the Kipp school, as an example of how well charters did. And there's been just a lack of that type of progress over a period of years. So is there any way or to get an idea of what's done in the interim?
So Kipp has had some change in leadership. They have a new superintendent this year, and maybe some administrators as well. I think the superintendent started July 1, so probably this data would not be reflective. We have not visited. Yeah,
but before then, that's right here, right now. And so he has to take what, or she has to take what is at the present. But like I say, over a period of time where you see, it could, surely there was a notice of the decline in scores and maybe graduation rates or college entrance rates. You know, they touted that as being their big plus. So I'm just wondering, and I see Nachman nodding his head. I think about the intense infusion of funds that came from the Walton Foundation and other foundations. I don't know what the status of that is, but that was one thing that was noted. Great contributions and fundraising was up. So, and not just them, but those that are making progress either way, to be able to note and to highlight interventions or attention or whatever it is. But it just seems like just daylight and darkness in terms of what Kipp has done.
So last year when Pine Bluff Lighthouse Academy came, that's what they reported on, were the interventions and things that they were doing to help student achievement. And we did a monitoring at the Jacksonville Lighthouse, and they did have lots of good things in place. The staff was aware of all the interventions, all the resources for students. And so I think any of them can definitely come in and report on what they're doing. We visited Kipp last year, but it was for standards for accreditation. So we didn't really have anyone that went in to see what was going on, what they were doing as far as interventions and that type of thing go. So we can certainly do that again.
Well, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the other end of the spectrum, not them reporting, but having a way to monitor and to correct and readjust and to, take, whatever, or to at least define what the difference is between then and now. That's my, because nationally, the Kipp model, and I don't know that we hear a lot, but I know locally that was, I was a part of a group of philanthropic funders for rural philanthropic funders that actually went there to look at it as a model. So I would imagine if that group came around today, and I think Phil was involved, they wouldn't go to Kipp as the star of, and so that was my question, and maybe there isn't, but I think there should be a way to make the readjustment, or at least, if we're going to use the charters as innovative models, or continue to use them as innovative models for districts, then I think we need to have a way to redirect or correct when we see a decline in whatever's going on.
Absolutely. I was a little slow out the gate. I couldn't get off mute here to make a comment or two. Ms. Newton, you're right on point there. I've had the opportunity to meet the new superintendent virtually when he came on board, and he's going to bring a lot of experience, but kind of a big picture and to narrow it down. The schools with these, we need to hear from them. We need to find out what's going on. If they already have a plan in place, it's okay for us to hear about the plan that they have in place. If they're on the upswing, what we want to make sure is that they're not on the downswing. I know a little bit of history behind when I met the superintendent. I asked him some questions, and the key piece was, what happened, what's gone wrong, and I also asked the same thing of Scott Shirey. And most of us know Scott was the founder of Kipp in the Delta and so forth. They overextended themselves. They went into Forest City for a while. And after a while, if I could liken it to I have a military background, it's kind of like overextending your supply lines. No matter how good you are, no unit can outrun their supply line. And they reached a point where they could not provide the type of education that they typically do, the extended day and those type of models, the extra time with the kids, and things really took a downturn. But you all don't need to hear that from me. We need to have someone from Kipp, along with ADE, to come before us, and ADE should have the data that this is where they were and this is where they are now. And Kipp needs to be able to explain to us what happened very succinctly. And then they need to come back and doing the same presentation, say, what are we going to be doing differently? And ADE need to be able to validate what they're doing differently to bring those scores up. And just to kind of sum this up a little bit, I was looking at this list here. We got a couple of them that has a couple of D's in a row. Those that have straight D's, which I see Kipp is in that category, and those that have, I will start off with the ones that have 3 D's. If they have an F, Lord help them, they should definitely be before us. But if they have 2 D's in a row, 3 D's in a row, they definitely should be coming to us. If they have 2 D's in a row, it depends on the number of 3 D's. The 2 D's need to be coming to us. We want to catch them before they get too far down the road if we can. And I would like to get the Ms. Webb's just take on that. Does that make sense, or should we look at something different?
Absolutely. No, it does make perfect sense.
I'm trying to find the raise my hand button, but
That's all right. Go ahead, Ms. Clemmer.
I also had a question about, I've got to click back over to my PDF, about Graduate Arkansas. I gather that we don't have, I'm not sure why we don't have a letter grade there, and y'all can explain that to me as still a new board member. But this graduation rate for a school called Graduate Arkansas at 23.9, I don't know the history of them, so I don't know if anybody can just tell me what that means, but
So
I mean, that's
Graduate
significant.
Arkansas is a credit recovery or an ALE environment, and so they don't get a letter grade.
Okay.
They do get a graduation rate, but they're serving those students that maybe dropped out somewhere else and came to their school to hopefully try to finish.
Where are they located?
They're located in Little Rock.
That's not the one at the Goodwill, that's Excel, isn't it?
Correct.
No, but they're on the highway, on the way to Goodwill. If you were driving down, what is that, 40,
Yeah, 30.
30?
Yeah.
Then you would pass Graduate Arkansas before you got to the Goodwill
Okay.
Excel Center.
So, okay, these are people though that have really, they dropped off the grid before this almost, and now we're trying to help them get back on. Okay.
I would say totally off the grid. I mean, these are kind of the last chance for a lot of these students. And there have been days, I know the principal out there, like myself and Mr. Key, she's from Gurdon originally. You know, there's a lot of good things come out of Gurdon other than the Gurdon Light now.
Well, my daughter teaches ALE, so I know it's a very difficult environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And usually when they've been coming before us, a lot of their students are just, it's either this or nothing, pretty much. So, but that was a great question. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Wright McMurray, did you have another comment?
No, I just thought that helped clear up for me, because that's where my mind was kind of going, that if they have D's and F's, unless there's something that's really explainable of why that is, then my thought would be those are the ones that I would want to have conversations with. So thank you.
So I do have a little bit of the data that Ms. Clemmer asked for, the reading scores for the schools around Kipp. So in Osceola, they had 55.67% of their students needed support in reading. Blyville was 60.53, and Helena was 55.96.
So there, and which one of these is which one of these KIPP schools is in Osceola?
Neither. I think the closest one would probably be Blyville.
Okay. I thought because we used Osceola. So did we hear Blyville? I'm sorry.
Blyville was 60.53 needed support in
Okay.
reading.
Okay. So they're 10% better. I guess you could look at it that way.
Go ahead.
I think as we talk through the schools that we want to stick with, and I like Dr. Williams' ideas about the 2 D's in a row and the F. I think those are schools that we need to talk to as well. It would be also good to have the comparison to the public schools in those areas, just like we just did with Kipp, to have a comparative comparison. Sorry if the keywords were familiar, but But to have that also so we can see what the environment is in each of the communities.
Ms. Webb, can you access the data? I know that every charter school has data on the students that are enrolled to see which traditional public schools they primarily came from, and maybe we could run the data on those schools to build the comparison. Okay. And Ms. Wright McMurray, you had another?
That was part of my question, because I'm looking at, so for Kipp Delta, it says that the in need of support is 52.7, but what is the specific percentage for that individual school?
So the law that places those districts in need of support is done by district, and that's why
So
you're
Kipp
seeing
Delta is considered a whole district, so
yes.
we can't really see what Blytheville Kipp Delta is doing in comparison to
We can, if you go,
Blytheville High School.
we can go into their ESSA school index and pull out their percentage of kids that were reading on grade level.
Okay.
So we can pull that out of the ESSA school index and get that as well. But the law that identifies schools in need of support is by district.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, here's something I just noticed that's interesting to me is that the Blytheville Conversion School is a D and 2 Fs. And you also have a Kipp school in Blytheville also. So that's just kind of raises a red flag to me. It's what's kind of going on in education in general if we have both Kipp Delta, Kipp there, and the conversion charter school there too, and they're both struggling.
So panel, what I've heard you say is let's prioritize any of our open enrollment charters that have an F. Most recently, if they have 3 Ds in a row and then 2 Ds in a row, if we use that prioritization and put together the data that you've requested and then ask those charter schools to come back and answer the questions, what happened to get them to that situation, and do they have a plan in place to have a different outcome for the future? Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add to that?
Are we going to the conversions next, or?
Yes, we'll do that one
okay.
next.
Okay.
Ms. Hyatt?
So you're welcome to do this at the end, or you can do it now for open enrollments and then for district conversions. But if you're wanting to bring them in for a review to answer questions and present their plan, we'll need a motion to do that, and then we'll give proper notice and work with them to make sure they have all the information you've requested. So you'll need to state the schools and make a motion. And you can do them all together if you want, all in one motion, instead of each individual school.
Ms. Webb, it'll take a little bit of time to run all of the data and put all that together for a packet. And I'm wondering if, I know we have a long agenda, 2 days in December to review renewals. And then what does the calendar look like for January and February? Open. So let me ask the panel this. Would you prefer to have the data prepared for you in January and we can narrow down the districts you want to bring in, or do you want to bring in, charters, or do you want to bring in the charters that meet this criteria and we can schedule some for January and some for February?
That's a good question. Here's just a thought for me, and I'm open to obviously to the will of the board. As long as we're taking a look at it, I think that's the most important thing. So I would rather have I would suggest having the data available. If we could look at the data and the data showing an uptrend, then if there's quite a few of them, then those may be the ones that we can eliminate from bringing them in, if we have the real data in front of us to take a look at. You know, you can have a D and you might have a couple of Ds in a row, but if your scores are higher, but you just hadn't crossed that threshold, then they may not necessarily have to be a priority if we could see based on the data that they're moving in the right direction.
We could also ask the charters to give us a written answer to those two questions. What happened previously and what will be different, or what is their plan in place for the future. We could have those to review as well without having to bring them away from the classrooms, that we could put into that data. Does that sound acceptable?
Yes,
But
I like both of those ideas.
but for me, if they have two Fs, that's, I don't know, and I'm new, so if they have a D and two Fs consistently, that's just somebody I definitely that I would want to see, but
Okay. So
I'm new.
let us pull all of this, all the data together. If that's agreeable by the panel, let us get everything together for you and have that ready for us to review in January. Does that sound good, Ms. Webb, or do you have some other suggestion?
And we can have it ready by the December meeting, so I could get it to you at that point. If you want to decide who to bring in, who you would like to bring in January, you could decide that in December if you wanted to. We can get that data together, whichever way is fine.
That'll work great. So then we can bring in the open enrollment charters in January that we identify. Perfect. So, Ms. Webb, when we can notify the open enrollment charters that we're going to discuss that during the December meeting. So it'll be quite a bit of data for you to look at ahead of time, so that each one of us can kind of have our list of who we, kind of have our notes of which one we'll feel like we may want to discuss to bring in. Ms. Clemmer?
Well, what it looked like to me, I'm obviously missing something. We didn't have that many that had 3Ds. I mean, is this not the comprehensive list? Are we gonna be looking at who else is on? I mean, don't we know right now who has the Ds? Do you see what I'm asking? Am I being clear enough?
Yes. Let me make a quick scan here.
I guess I'm thinking it's not that many schools, unless there's a big list that I don't know about.
So I'm seeing one with 2 Fs, which would be Pine Bluff Lighthouse Elementary, and then on the 3 and Capital City Lighthouse Lower Academy. And then on the 3D list is Arkansas Virtual Academy Elementary, Exalt Academy, Kipp Elementary Academy.
Okay, I was not getting, I hadn't scrolled down to see the bottom of my page. That's what I had not
Yeah,
done.
Blytheville College Prep. And then when you start the 2D list, Scott Elementary and Academics Plus.
So we still have quite a few there. That is gonna be, I'm sorry, my view was not expanded adequately.
Yes, it's quite a lengthy list of schools. So if we're agreeable, we'll let Ms. Webb contact them and put together the packets of information that'll give us time to review, and then we can narrow down which ones we want to have log on with us in January. Is that agreeable by everyone?
Yes, sir. What are we probably looking at? Probably about a 30 to 45 minute presentation from each school, or at least 30 minutes.
If we end up doing a full review, it would at least be 30 minutes. Just anecdotally, in the past, it's kind of depended on the presentation. I know that when we did the Pine Bluff Lighthouse Charter last year, it was a rather lengthy. You remember, Dr. Williams, it was pretty lengthy because we had to go over a lot of stuff. So it just kind of depends on what the issues are. Once we have a little bit more information and you guys know exactly what you're looking for, we'll have a better idea about how long those things will take.
Yeah. So that's where that data can help us kind of hone down a little bit on which schools and prioritize them.
Yes, sir. Data-driven decision-making, we love it.
Oh, yes.
All right. At this time, Ms. Hyatt, we don't need a motion, is that correct? We've just built our criteria. All right. Let's move then to the review of district conversion charter schools. In keeping with the similar criteria, you would have one that has Fs, and that would be Blytheville High School, a new tech school. And Ms. Webb, they're not renewing their charter, is what they have communicated with our office. And then 3Ds would be Hot Springs Junior Academy, Hot Springs World Class High School, Osceola STEM Academy, and 2Ds would be Academies of West Memphis, Harrisburg College and Career Prep, and Warren Middle School. Ms. Hyatt?
One of those schools, Hot Springs World Class High School, they're up for renewal, so you'll actually have a full review of them in December.
Hot Springs World Class High School?
Yes.
Also, in looking at Blytheville, I know they're not up for renewal. I'm of the mind and really interested in feedback to still hear from the district on exactly what they're going to be doing different as just the, you're basically closing down a conversion school that was not successful, a conversion charter. And so now what are you going to do differently with your regular high school? Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Dr. Williams, are you asking us to bring them in or to inquire that and see if we can get a response?
Just inquire and get a response for now. This is a nice little enrollment and so forth, and between this conversion charter school and the Kipp school in Blytheville, that's 2 out of 3 when you look at the traditional public school. So I think it would be helpful just for you all to look into the traditional public school, which is the conversion, and see what's going on and what are their plans when they bring those students back in. If they were struggling over there, you know, what are they going to be doing differently?
If you'll notice on Blytheville High School that they have had a declining enrollment, a quite substantial decline.
You know, that's really interesting in the sense that where's Big River Steel? Where's Nucor, the steel plant located at? Anyone have any idea?
Nucor's in Blytheville, Big River Steel's in Osceola. Or Nucor's in Marmarell, but the Blytheville area.
Blytheville, yes. Okay. So I wonder where the kids are going to school at. For those that work in the steel mill. That was just a question to follow up with them when you had a conversation with them. That's
Okay.
Ms. Clemmer, I just say go
Ms.
for
Clemmer?
it.
Well, I've got to reform that question. Remind me, when we're looking at Blytheville conversion, does that mean all of Blytheville High became conversion, or did they create a separate entity? That's what I wasn't clear about.
It was one school, and
So
they went to, yes, they went to a new tech model. The whole high school, yes. If we've seen this, and it may be, I'm just guessing, I'm looking at Ms. Webb, we've seen before when we've had district conversions that moved to a new tech high model, And then when their contract for New Tech wears out or runs out, it's not necessarily a sustainable model unless a lot of resources have been put in place to prepare for that sustainability. Is that, Ms. Webb?
Yes, if you contract with the New Tech network, that's quite an expensive endeavor. And so I think several years ago, the state gave grants for that, which kind of covered that fee to work with the organization. And since that's gone, that's usually a big hindrance for them continuing New Tech. And with the New Tech school, teachers have to be trained and students have to be trained to sometimes work independently and in groups. And sometimes that may be a struggle if you have struggling students to begin with. That's maybe not always the best approach.
Any other things that you're noticing on this data? One of the things that I'm quite interested in, and we'll need to have some time to study this, will be our virtual academies. If you notice, have had, they came to us and asked for increase in enrollment, and sometimes they've tripled their numbers. So that's not something they can come in and report on probably in January, but it's something that I think as a state we'll want to watch and study and talk to these superintendents about what they did well, what they learned, and how we can apply that for other future virtual schools or virtual programs.
You know, another thought here also, when you were saying that, you brought something else to mind about when we look at the change in enrollment, we just need to think about how we're going to handle this year from a COVID standpoint, with all the various impacts that's happening to the schools. I don't know exactly how to interpret that to say exactly what that means right now, but it's just something that, you know, talking about the elephant sitting on the couch in the living room, that's just something that we just got to think about, you know, whatever decisions we made. It'll be interesting to hear from these schools exactly how they're doing things. So anyway, that was just a thought. So when you all have conversations with them, the COVID question is kind of front and center, and I don't know how much they can pivot to do anything different, at least doing this year. But anyway, that's just something to put out there.
But I think we don't need that in a vacuum. I mean, we need to know if they're dropping because of COVID, then we need it in relation to the other schools, the face-to-face schools, who are also doing virtual too, some virtual.
You know, I think so. Nachman, that really highlights something we've been talking about. I was on a national call yesterday around workforce and all the things that we've tried to do relative to getting young people ready for employment and getting them into training, and that the COVID looms large overall. I think probably not giving the board anything, I mean, the staff anything extra to do, but we've seen here in our 5 counties, the 10th Judicial District, 5 times the cases we've had before going to juvenile court because of the young people not being virtually active. And so that impacts, you know, if there were 2 Fs or 3 Ds or whatever, it might be Fs across the board. And we've got to look at that holistically as it relates to the charters and as it relates to the regular public school systems. Is what impact, because I say they have a docket, 2 or 3 pages of young people that schools have filed petitions about not participating in COVID. And you have a variety of different ways. He won't get out of bed, my computer doesn't work, or whatever. But in light of COVID, you know, it's almost like, okay, we're gonna use this data, but we've got to use this variable of COVID to say, okay, you're an F, but you would have been a C. not, it's not that simplistic, but just to say everything is skewed. And and maybe if you think it's like the elephant Ackman was talking about, if you think it looks bad now, then given the other factors of poverty, lack of transportation, lack of access to broadband, and some things that are outside the district's control in some instances, it's going to be a totally different thing. So how, comparing apples to apples, and Ackman, that's one of his phrases, how do we compare that given this most unusual set of circumstances? And so what is a measurement and what's not a measurement, and what we should do compared to what we can't, given our inability. I was saying yesterday, one of the things that we had was an advantage of being able to be one-on-one with our clients, so we could throw an obstacle in their way before as a benefit, rather than have them trip or remove an obstacle. We could do that as we saw it come along, but now our kids are tripping and falling in crevices, and then falling in canyons. And we are not there. Or, you can't call my agency or school social worker or just drop by. So I think that's going to be something we're going to look at in a few months when we look at data to show it's just, you know what I'm talking about. It's not going to be indicative of, it's not going to be real, but it is going to be surreal, I think, in terms of what does it mean? Who will know what it means?
Toyce, I like what you're saying, because what you're saying is we need, in this process that we're going through, we don't just need to look at these numbers, which are all, or these grades, which are all a year or two old now, but we need to look forward as best we can. And maybe that's a third question to put to these schools, is to ask them what are their current challenges that they're facing with COVID, and where, because they know what they are, and where are the big holes, where can we potentially help? Because you're right, if we had the current grades, they may all be us for the next couple of years because of what's happening. And let me ask you, is the grading system this year just going to be skipped, or will there be grades given at some point in time for this current year?
So the letter grades is part of the state accountability system, and of course we have a legislative session coming up, and those issues I'm sure will be discussed during this session. Right now we are in the process, and tomorrow during our ESSA steering committee we will have probably a 3-hour conversation about this, but the plan right now is to assess according to our assessment schedule. I think what you've just highlighted over and over is the need for data. We really need to know the impact of COVID-19, and we are going to have additional components that we can look at our data through the lens of the student instructional options that have been selected. So we are working very diligently tomorrow to talk through the calculation of the ESSA school index. We need that information, but our schools really need to know if there is a learning loss, how much of a learning loss, and which students may have been most effective. We're also looking to see, how did these instructional options impact kids, and what perceptions do we as the public have regarding these different instructional options? Who do we think was most likely to select an all virtual model? In reality, who really did? And so that's the data that we're running, and we'll continue to run and model throughout this school year. We'll have a lot of lessons to learn, but we're going to need data to know what we've learned. So we will be discussing that tomorrow. Okay, so if your criteria is the same, that we will put together data regarding prioritizing Fs, 3Ds, and then 2Ds, put that data together and really looking at what has happened. And then your third question, you add in what are your current challenges and how are you addressing those challenges? So what's going to be different in the future, and do you have a plan in place to accomplish the change that you're desiring? And I think your point is well taken. Until we know the true impact of COVID-19, there may be some big barriers for the entire state that we all have to look at and develop a plan to overcome in the future. Any other comments or questions regarding district conversion, regarding the district conversion charter schools? So Ms. Webb, will you have time to put together the data on those as well and have those in the December packet? Okay, she said yes. All right, any other comments or questions from today? Any feedback on how we could do this better, or anything that would be helpful to you as a panel member?
No, I think y'all doing a great job.
I thought Ms. Webb's document here was concise, but really started the conversations in the directions that we all needed to go. So kudos to you, Ms. Webb. All right. Any other business before the panel today? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. I second then.
So by Ms. Clemmer, second by Dr. Williams. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.